Welcome to Expanding Access, a podcast by Behavioral Health Tech, where we explore the cutting edge of mental health, substance use, and autism and IDD care. Each episode features insightful conversations with industry leaders who are driving real change through technology and innovation. Whether you're a provider, payer, or just passionate about expanding access to behavioral health care, you won't want to miss these stories. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone. I'm Solomay Tibabu, your host for the Expanding Access podcast, and I am thrilled to have such an amazing guest with us today. Thank you, Chris Thompson, for being here. Really honored to have you be able to share your story with us. It's really quite amazing. So maybe we can start there. Who are you and how did you get into this space?
Yeah, thank you. And so glad to be here. I'm Chris Thompson. I am the founder of the Sober Sidekick platform. And I ended up in this space through my own personal battle with addiction. Never had plans to start a company in digital health. I was simply in the process of rebuilding my own life. I was living in a halfway house, had been sober for about 30 days at the time, and was thinking about all the things that had led me to relapsing and starting over in the past and what I needed to do differently this time. And really the biggest thing that stuck out was I can't isolate and I've got to build a network of support. I was also interested in learning how to build apps at that point in time. So I set out to try to build an app for the purposes of helping people build connection when they're in their most isolated and dark moments. And I wasn't that far removed from my most isolated and dark moment. So I was the first user. And simply put, the problem statement, and I've witnessed this personally, which is relapses, suicides, and overdoses don't happen in clinics or therapy sessions. They happen when people are alone. And multiple times living in that halfway house over the first couple of years, I saw people relapse and die as a result of isolating and not reaching out. And for every single person in my life who's no longer here, had they just reached out before that last time where they decided to pick up, that would have made all the difference. So the purpose of everything we do is to lower those barriers to entry to that necessary need for human connection as people walk through and climb out of hell. So I've been on this journey about 7 years. Super grateful for everything it's taught me along the way. And yeah, just grateful.
Thank you so much for sharing. Really appreciate that background. And amazing that it could lead you to Sober Sidekick and just the many people you help today. It's so wonderful. A little background on Sober Sidekick. What's the experience like when people join? What do they get?
So the most important thing for any new member is building a connection with another member on the platform. So we design our onboarding with the main goal being, how can we get this member to write a comment to another member? So what you'll see is a platform designed around a lot of the social principles you'll see on many social networks, but with a we thesis, we call it with empathy, without ego. So everything about the experience is gamified around empathy. Everything is about promoting empathy. And then all of our UX decisions, we try to not go against anything that reinforces ego, which is what you'll see in most social communities. So for every user, you see next to their profile the number of times they've given support to others, along with the amount of time they've been sober. As a user yourself, you'll see your butterfly effect. You supported 5 people this week. You have gone out and supported 50 more. So what's really, really important for someone in early recovery is to show them firsthand that their life has meaning and they have value and they have something to give to the world. And that's what so much of this user experience is showing them that even their darkest moments can help lift someone up or show someone else that they're not alone or remind someone else to keep going. It also tracks your sober time. So we visualize your progress as you gain more and more days, track multiple addictions. There's 24/7 AA meetings you can join through the app, 24/7 NA meetings you can join as well. But the main sticking point, like one thing I often say is people don't come back for the features or the design, they come back for each other. And it's as users really, really quickly, about 20% of people who download this app are actually writing a comment to another user in their first session. within 10 minutes of downloading. So we did a lot of A and B testing and the onboarding along the way, because that is the most critical thing, is if they build connections on this platform, they'll keep coming back.
Oh, just love the visual with the butterfly effect. How powerful and so necessary. And you alluded to something else earlier around basically like an always on model. Can you talk about what that continuous real-time intervention looks like in practice? And how is it different from, I guess, traditional episodic treatment approaches?
Yeah. So one thing I say very, very often is relapses, suicides, overdoses almost never happen in a doctor's office or a rehab or a therapy session. These are things that happen when people are alone. So episodic care in the US happens typically after an event like that happens. Then a person completes a 30-day stay in a rehab, they complete, then they're back on their own. And the average person who goes to rehab once is going 7 times. 95% of those who complete a stay in rehab are relapsing within a year. So the problem cannot be solved in the clinics or within the healthcare system, because that's not where these things are happening. So when it comes to always on, we also call it the whatever it takes model. More relapses are reported to us than any healthcare system that we know of. Over the last 12 months, north of 200,000 people have self-reported a relapse into this platform. And then because of the volume of sobriety and behavioral data that we're able to get as a result of people coming back over and over for each other, we can actually predict the likelihood of an active member on our platform to relapse in the next 2 weeks with 93+% accuracy. So when it comes to always on, we're often the first to know when someone's risk changes. And at that point in time, we spent months, sometimes years, building trust with that member to where they'll respond to a push notification from us. And more importantly, they'll respond to a push notification from another member whom the empathy algorithm has prompted this member over here who's doing well to reach out and give support to this member over here. And then with all the flags and things we're able to see from a data perspective, we also have an in-house care navigation team where they're also always on from the perspective of when we see that someone needs a higher level of care than just what the app can provide, getting in touch with that member, reaching out through this platform that they already have so much trust with. And I would say, like, the biggest problem in terms of treating addiction is trust. You can ask your doctor if it's a good idea for you to shoot fentanyl, and you know what the answer is going to be. No one's asking their doctor that question. No one's consulting their doctor when it comes to their drug addiction, because there's very few people that they feel safe when it comes to discussing their addiction, or more specifically discussing the things that they use that drug of choice to overcome. Another thing I say often is alcohol, drugs are no one's problem. It's their solution. It's their solution for the divorce they're going through or the financial troubles that they're facing. And all these different things are the solution of which they found substances to overcome with. And through this platform, it gives them that ability to anonymously talk about the divorce and those dark feelings that they're feeling. Or, we've seen law enforcement officers use this platform because there's no safe place to talk about their stress or mental health. Like, all different personas and walks of life utilizing this platform to get proactive about their mental health. And then the other thing, even if you're meeting with a therapist once a week, there's still 167 hours in between therapy sessions. And it's in those 167 hours where you turn knowledge into practice. And this platform is with those members in those critical moments, each step of the way. I'm rambling, but another fun fact is more relapses happen in airports than anywhere else. So you look at the day-to-day in terms of percentages. So you look at the day-to-day of overcoming any addiction or any mental health battle. The real battle is in the trenches. It's in the day-to-day, and giving people that always on ability to engage with something that's going to help them move forward in the direction that they're trying to go.
Wow, that's super interesting. That piece around predicting and preventing relapse, without getting overly technical, it sounds like, you're able to identify and predict that risk, but you also have these various channels to engage to support, whether it's the peers or the care navigators throughout those other 168 hours. It's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm. Yeah, that's pretty rare. And I'm super excited that our audience could learn about that because we talk a lot about access and quality, and it's not just about clinicians, but peers
Mm-hmm.
are their own category that brings something very unique to care, and you're doing just that. So really exciting work. I'd love to ask you about something you said in our conversations earlier was taking full risk on a substance use carve out. Can you share a little bit more about what you're building with this full risk model and maybe what partners can expect to be different around incentives, accountability, outcomes, all those things?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the reasons we're working in healthcare is through my own personal experience. I saw not just where healthcare has let down this population, but in many instances, intentionally profited from relapse and failure when it comes to this population. So for 2 years of my own life, I lived in a halfway house. And the revenue model of the halfway house was kickbacks every time someone relapsed. So literally the place that I was living in, my roommates were living in, were worth more if we continue to relapse than if we stay sober. And, if you Google body brokering /rehabs, you'll see tons and tons of articles about treatment center owner going to jail for fraud or treatment center owner trafficking patients. And when you look at the current model in the US, there's very little incentive for someone to have sustained success after treatment. But you'll see $10,000 to $20,000 per member in incentives for chronic relapser. And that's why the average in the US is someone who goes to rehab once is going 7 times, and 95% of them are relapsing within a year of treatment. This would not be acceptable if it was heart surgery, repeating the same level of care 7x, or any other condition, but for some reason it's acceptable within behavioral health for people to be inpatient, hospitalized over and over and over again with no accountability. So the model that we're bringing forward is around, with a payer, how do we get your 7 round trips that your population is taking to rehab down from 7 to 6 to 5 to 4 on average? How can we work collectively to catch people before they fall? And we call it the whatever it takes model because oftentimes it's a non-clinical need far long before it becomes a clinical need. And these relapses are a result of people feeling a lack of hope and feeling a lack of progress or ability to overcome this long-term battle that they have with addiction. So when it comes to care navigation that we do for the purposes of avoidance of rehab, if it's getting someone an Uber to an AA meeting, then it's getting someone an Uber to an AA meeting. Like for every single person, their own journey is different. And the most important thing is having that nonstop engagement loop with that individual, maintaining that trust to where we continue to be the first to know when anything changes in that member's journey. So it's truly designed to be holistic because recovery is holistic. 50% of people who get to the huge milestone of a year sober relapse between years 1 and 2. So it's a lifelong journey. And this idea that we're going to fix people in a 30-day stay in rehab is just setting people up to fail. So from our perspective, this model has to change because people are dying as a result. And that's why we're so bullish on this perspective. And we'll just continue to do whatever it takes for our members' success.
I'm sure a lot of payers are super interested in learning more about that because lots of opportunity for improvement.
Mm-hmm.
And Chris, I want to double down on something that you've said a few times now, and this idea of scale and trust. It's like when you operate what I believe is the largest digital sobriety community, how exactly are you keeping trust and safety high while also scaling engagement and outcomes?
Yeah. So first thing I'd say from a trust perspective is you can look our app up in Google Play or the Apple App Store, and you'll see tens of thousands of written consumer reviews, average 4.8 out of 5. That's something you can't fake or game. And it's one of our core KPIs from the beginning. The other thing is, the first 3 years building and growing this platform, we had no healthcare partners, and our only stakeholder was the consumer. And as a result, oftentimes the number one result if someone Googles the word quit in the Google Play Store. And we found ourselves at the top of the app stores in consumer in almost every English speaking country because the consumer has always been the primary stakeholder. We also grew to 75,000 members before we had $1 in venture capital. So the reason why we've been able to do this is because from the beginning and always will be the consumer, our primary stakeholder. And we'll walk away from large healthcare contracts before we walk away from the consumer. And there's actually a Harvard Business School case study about our decision to walk away from some large contracts and shift our revenue model for the sake of the consumer being our primary stakeholder. So it's not something that we claim or speak to. It's core to everything we are. Is the consumer trust is the bottom line. And then when you talk about scaling trust, it goes back to that with empathy, without ego thesis. So the culture of this platform, every UX decision, it's about how do we further incentivize users to act with empathy? And then how do we ensure that any action out of ego is not rewarded within this platform? And as a result, we see members who have given support to other members over 10,000 times because the intrinsic value of this platform they've seen for themselves is what they're able to give for others. And literally before you put it, we're the only platform in the world that I know of, only social platform in the world that I know of, where before you write a post about yourself, the app has you give support to someone first. So you literally cannot write about yourself before you're giving support to someone else. Literally every single member who's ever posted had to give support to someone else in their own journey. And that includes people who are on day one of their journey. And I've heard the question asked before, like, why would you make someone who's on day one give support to someone else? And the reason is to show that person, because on their day one, they have meaning and purpose and value that they can give to others. And that's actually one of the biggest, and one of the things we've discovered from a data perspective is getting members to give support to someone else leads to them being 3x more engaged and have 3x longer retention within the platform. Healthcare likes to treat this population oftentimes like victims, like people who can't help themselves. And this whole platform is about building that momentum and that self-trust and embracing the version of yourself that you intend to be, instead of just focusing on the version of yourself you don't want to be anymore. Another analogy, and I'm sorry for all the different analogies, but if someone's hanging on the edge of a cliff, you don't remind them, hey, if you fall, you'll probably break your back if you don't die. If someone's hanging on the edge of a cliff, if someone's hanging on the edge of a cliff, you remind them who they are and all the reasons why they're fighting. And I guess to summarize that point, you don't motivate people by reminding them what they don't want to be. It's reminding them who they really truly are and who they intend to be as that North Star.
Chris, I love all of the analogies. Really, so great. Keep them up. Beautiful. Well, maybe you'll have one for this next question. I know statistically in our audience, there is a friend or a caregiver who is trying to support somebody who is struggling with addiction. Do you have any advice for them on just taking the first step on how they can best support?
Yeah. So first thing I'll say is there's definitely no silver bullet. And to anyone who's going through a situation themselves or witnessing it with a family, it's truly one of the hardest things to walk through. And just want to express so much empathy and love for you. But in terms of advice, or at least in my experience, you can't fix the addiction. The addiction they'll have with them for the rest of their life. And oftentimes the addiction has been working in their genetics for generations before they even were confronted with the addiction. So the addiction is not something that any of us can fix directly. But once again, alcohol or drugs are not the problem. They're the solution. And they're the solution for isolation. They're a solution for a lack of connection. They're a solution for self-doubt, fear, resentment, all these different things. And what I've seen have the most meaning, especially for my friends who may still be in active addiction, is just reminding them how much they mattered to me, and never ever preaching to them, never ever ranting to them, but just reminding them what they mean to me, that I'm grateful that they're in my life and that I'm here if they ever need to talk. And once again, the addiction is the solution to all those problems, whether it be the divorce or the lost job or the sick child or the caregiver burnout or all these different things, and reminding them that they're not alone as they go through these moments. And then also what is super important is being vulnerable yourself, because we all have our own things, whether it's addiction or something else, we all have our own things that make us human. And someone who's an addict isn't any less human than anyone else. And we all have our shit. We all have our things that we're working through, and saying, hey, here's what I've been struggling with lately, and I've been working towards it, and just opening up that channel of vulnerability. Or when I went through a divorce, that was rough. That was the worst. Just opening up those channels of vulnerability and building trust. And I think an important question after a conversation with someone who's battling addiction is asking yourself, did I have that conversation in a way where they would come back to me later? So it's not going to be about the statistics or the psychological knowledge that you dump on anyone that's going to change their behaviors, but the trust and connection that they feel with you.
Really great advice. And of course, I could see a lot of those things applying to oneself too. If I could wrap up with just one more question, Chris, what would you say to somebody in the audience who is just on the fence of taking the first step for themselves if they're struggling with addiction?
Yeah. First thing I'll tell you is you're never alone, and you're not alone. And I've spent years of my life on the fence. Never, ever did I picture that this would be my life. At one point in time, I was a college athlete. I felt like I could climb any mountain, all the self-confidence in the world. And it was debilitating, as no amount of willpower could help me overcome this. The amount of times I made promises to myself, never again, only to do the same thing over and over again. So, that guilt, that shame that you might feel, I felt it, and you're not alone. And there's people in your life who have also battled it, but may not have shared it with you, So first thing is setting that guilt and shame aside. And then the other thing is that first step can be the smallest step. It could be downloading this app. It's free. It could be calling a friend who battled addiction at one point in time, but doesn't anymore. Or even calling a friend who's not battling addiction and just saying like, hey, I'm just struggling here. It could be a book, but just committing to yourself that your life is worth the work. That's a comment I share to our users all the time. It's probably the comment that I probably sent the most within the Sober Sidekick platform, which is just, your life is worth the work. And addiction doesn't have to be a tragic story, and it can be an epic real life comeback story. So whether it's one day or today is your day one, today could be that day one of that comeback story. It doesn't mean it's going to be all uphill from here, but it could be a new story that you take on, a new story that you embrace. But just know you're never alone. You'll always have the Sober Sidekick community as a resource. It's free to everyone if you want to take a look at that. And then there's so many other meaningful resources I found along the way. But yeah, you're not alone.
Couldn't have said it better. Thank you so much, Chris. And I really do encourage everyone in our audience to go check out, download Sober Sidekick. What a great resource, and always such a pleasure getting to hear your story and share your experience with us. Thanks again.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for tuning in to Expanding Access. We hope you're feeling inspired by today's discussion. If you've enjoyed the episode, subscribe and share it with your network. For more content and opportunities to get involved in transforming care, visit behavioralhealthtech.com. Until next time, let's keep pushing boundaries and expanding access together.